Today I want to continue on my little series about INFJ weaknesses. So today we're going to talk about having difficulty staying in the moment, or as I like to call it, living in la la land. Introverted intuition. That is what they say is the INFJ's, first function, most used function, favorite function, whatever. And introverted intuition to me is, my thought process, my pattern of processing things. And it's hard to explain for someone that doesn't process things that way. Basically everything, just rolls around in your head and you process things in there. Everything is internal, and it's almost like living in two worlds. We have the external world, which is, work and people and emotions and noise. The external world can be very overwhelming for intuitive types. It can be very loud and very disruptive, and yeah, things seem to run very slowly for me in the external world. Events that are going on, or even like the day-to-day things, seem to run very, very slowly. Now, on the opposite end of that, the internal world in your head, you have thoughts and dreams and ideas. It's always future focused. It's very difficult to think about, what we're doing right now. We're always thinking about, or I am always thinking about, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 years in the future, and trying to balance all of that out. And it seems also to run about 100 miles an hour. The brain is just going and going and going and going. And it's very, very quick, and it can kind of be overwhelming sometimes if you're trying to stay in. Sometimes it's almost impossible to just stay in the moment that you're in and not go back into your head and start trying to process things while you're in a moment. Now, for me, introverted intuition is a blessing and a curse. I'm just, in the past few years realizing that that is the way my brain works, and that's why I think the way I do. Now, the blessings are that I have, in that processing ability, I have some really great ideas. I have, really good insight into things, and a lot of peace. In, my internal world, I have beautiful idealistic relationships. My gardens are beautiful. I can, see them as a finished product. I can see projects being completed and what they'll look like and what I'll feel like when it's done. It's kind of like that people have these vision boards, these external vision boards that they set up. It's kind of like a vision board, but it's in your head. It's like daydreaming. You can see things to completion. You can see how beautiful it's going to look. How you're going to feel. You have this idealistic idea of what your relationships are going to look like and feel like. And also in that, la la land, I also have very clean floors for some reason. Very clean floors is really important to me, and they're usually not clean. I have dogs, I have kids, I have some cats, I have people in and out. We live in our house, we live in the country, there's lots of sand, so my floors are usually not clean. But in my, introverted intuition la la land, my floors are so clean, and they're so shiny, and just this idealistic, and that's the blessing, is that I can go into this. And, I was created to think this way, and the blessing, I can go into this way of thinking. I can go into my head and just, feel peaceful and see the beautiful things that could be and the way to get there. Now, the curse for me is that it can be distracting. you know, I'm trying to focus on a moment, you know, I'm sitting with someone, I'm hanging out with my family, we're at an event, I'm at work, whatever, and it can be distracting because as soon as I get into a little bit of overwhelm, or if my brain is saying we're done with this thing that we're doing, it wants to go into this and start thinking about how to solve a problem that, you know, maybe doesn't even exist, but my brain has decided that there's a problem. So it can be distracting and keep you from focusing on what is happening right in front of you. It also can sabotage your self-worth. And for me, this is a big one. You know, like I mentioned, I like to have clean floors. And I also have this idealistic idea of what my relationships with my children and with my husband are going to look like. And when they don't turn out that way, just because I have this idealistic idea in my head doesn't mean that I can control other people and their reaction to me. So it can sabotage your self-worth in that you have this idea and you have this beautiful picture of what it's going to look like, but then it doesn't turn out that way. So then you tend to turn that, or I tend to turn that back into myself, that I must have done something along the way that was wrong to make it not turn out that way. And maybe I need to change my schedule of when I wash my floors so that they stay clean longer or something. Or maybe I need new floors. But it ends up coming back on you as kind of an attack against, you know, what your worth is. And that's definitely a curse. The other part is, you know, in public, in conversations, and especially in new social situations, you can appear distant, cold, bored, or kind of weird. You'll look a little bit spacey in a conversation because sometimes you just kind of stare off into space and you are listening when someone's speaking. But as soon as, you know, you're having a conversation, that processing kicks in, and if you're tuned into that and not the person, you can look like, you know, you're not paying attention. So you can look, you know, aloof, or, you know, not recently, but, you know, in my past I've been called, you know, snobby, stuck up, cold, that kind of thing. And mostly, you know, I know that it's just the way that I was processing and not able to interact in a way that seemed normal. So, but there can be an unhealthy balance with this, you know, this kind of processing. This is the way that I was created. This is the way I was put together, for a purpose to, you know, love people in the way that I was made, excuse me. But intuitive people under stress definitely have an unhealthy balance. And, you know, this week for me, I did not have my day of rest that I talked about because our schedule was just too busy, and I did not have a day, excuse me, or even half a day that I could dedicate to that. So it didn't happen. And we also have, you know, school's going to be starting soon, and we have sports starting up, and everybody in my house is going to be back on a schedule. And, you know, I'm feeling stressed about all the planning and all the events that have to happen and the social things. And we did have a very busy weekend. So I'm feeling very stressed. And, you know, for normal people, that probably wouldn't stress them. They just, you know, get it on their calendar and get it situated and talk about it. But for me, I'm, you know, going over it and over it and over it in my head. And then, of course, that comes out in a different way. So I just have one little story, one example. I was, I'm so congested. I was at work this past week, and I had a client in my chair, which is, she was a new client for me. I know her outside of the salon, but she's a new client for me. And then I had forgotten something at home, so my husband was off, so he was going to bring them in, the towels for the salon. He was going to bring them in and drop them off for me. Well, the client that I have happened to also be his coworker. So he's dropped off the towels, and then he starts having a conversation with her about work. And then shortly after that, a friend of mine who I haven't seen for quite a while, she was also dropping off something for me, so she came in. So then it became, you know, this three-way conversation, my husband, my client, and then my friend. And in those types of situations, I don't always have anything to say, or I don't want to interrupt the conversation. So this is going on, but then I kind of am sensing from across the room, because my friend is standing across the room, that there's something in her spirit that's unsettled. And, you know, I then totally just detach from the conversation. I don't even know what they talked about, because my brain starts going into, you know, well, after we get done with this, or maybe I should interrupt their conversation and tell this friend that I need to talk to her because something's unsettled in her spirit. I could feel it. And I wanted to, you know, have a conversation with her, maybe pray with her, you know, figure out what was going on with her. But I couldn't stay in that moment and engage in that conversation with the people that were right in front of me. I have to go into this, you know, forward thinking, I'm going to fix, you know, this gal's emotions for her. So that was just an example of how that gets distracted. And then I may have looked to them like I was uninterested in their conversation. I'm not really sure, but you know, I can't read their minds, so I don't know how they felt, but I was not involved in that conversation. I had completely checked out and was back into my head. So I want to talk about how to balance this, how to have a healthy balance. And this is kind of what I've figured out that works for me, and I'd like to know if it works for you, if you try it for a few days, a week, whatever, and see if it helps you to kind of balance this out so you're not inside your head all of the time in La La Land, making yourself crazy. You need to make time for your internal world. You need to set aside time. It's kind of like that day of rest idea. You need to set aside time to sit with your introverted intuition and go through those thoughts. And, you know, the ways that I do that is I will, you know, walk around my yard. I will pull weeds. I will do something that is quiet, you know, that's away from the distractions of the world, from it's definitely a time with no electronics, no media, that I can just sit and process and think. And sometimes I write them down, and sometimes my brain just runs and runs and runs, and I let it. I try to, you know, just let it kind of flow through my head. And if you're a person that does a lot of that, you know, that comes very easy for you. But you do have to take the time to do it. And if you're a person that tries to shut that down and not do that, you need to find a space that you can do that in. You know, even if it's just going for a walk every day for 10 minutes through a quiet area, that you can just sit with your thoughts and look like a daydreaming weirdo. And that's just the way we're made. We're not daydreaming weirdos. We might be daydreamers, but we're not weirdos. So, yeah, you have to make the time for it. You have to do it and let your brain flow and allow it to go, and just, it's, you know, that's what it wants to do. And then the other thing is you need to get your ideas out. We aren't meant to keep them all in. You know, God made us this way to help people, to process things in a different way that other people don't. That's why everyone is so different, because then there's lots of different ideas and lots of ways of doing things. So digging through my journals again from, you know, a while ago, I found something that relates to this, I feel like, so I'm going to read it, of course. I don't know where this one came from. I don't think these were my words. These might have been someone's words to me. So I don't know how old it is, but anyway, I'll just read it. Minister out of who God has made you to be, people you have influence with. It has to be you. God has words for you and only you to say. I really like that. The word minister to me always kind of threw me off. I like to replace that word with love. So, or live, you know, live out of what God has made you to be, you know, live and love out of how you are created. There are things that you have to say, ideas that you have, insights that no one else has, and you need to share them. You need to tell them to other people. You know, if you are a person that really doesn't do that, start with people you know. You know, if you have this little thought that comes in your head, even if it's something like, oh, I like her shirt, you know, that's a really simple thing. But just start really small. And, you know, for me, it's always seems to be with older people, you know, elderly people in the grocery store. And I, you know, kind of have this thought about like, I should say this thing. And a lot of times now I will say it. And sometimes they look at me like I'm a weirdo and sometimes they smile, but it really helps to get those ideas out of your head. So, you know, write them down. If you have this amazing plan for something, write it down, draw a picture, tell somebody about it, because, you know, getting it out of your head is so healthy, and it really helps to, you know, keep that balance so that you can stay in the moment. Because if you let your introverted intuition run wild in the times that you can do that, and then take those things that you feel are safe and share them with a safe person, you really will get that balance. So good luck with that. Let me know how it goes for you. Let me know anything else that kind of pops in when you're watching this. And I appreciate you watching, and have a good weekend.